Hi, my name's Morgan Jeremus, and I'm with RT Book Reviews, and today I'm here with author Michael Barson, and he wrote Agonizing Love, an investigation into love comics. And I think that's my first question. Can you give me a definition on what exactly a love comic is?
Well, they don't exist anymore, Morgan, so it's a little hard to summarize how they flourished once, but basically they're stories 4 or 5 to an issue that are mini soap operas, let's say. They're 7 pages, 8 pages long, and it's usually one problem that must be solved. It's a problem involving a couple, and the problem can be 150 different things, but this story that's only 7 pages will deal with one of them. It could be an interfering mother-in-law. It could be the wife's insistence on status and her husband has a blue-collar job. It can be the reputation for being too fast, which the stories in this collection, they're 50 or 60 years old. So there were some themes that we still have today. There's always going to be mother-in-laws. But there are some things like being too fast that, I mean, people do have reputations still, but it's obviously a lot different than in 1951.
Right.
So when you look at these, they're quaint and funny unintentionally in a lot of ways, but in some other ways, like the status and the class struggle elements that are in some stories, you still have them today.
Absolutely, and you actually break out the different types. You're looking at comics mainly during the late 40s and through kind of the mid 50s, and you break them out. You know, we start with bliss, where a lot of the stories, a lot of the comics we're looking at are about engagements and weddings, first kisses, very fun things to read about, and then you go into jealousy, betrayal, despair, marriage hell, and you definitely have a kind of a downward spiral.
Well, Morgan, this is just the natural arc of a romance, right? I think we can all agree every romance starts with bliss. Otherwise, it wouldn't get any further. But yes, I thought it would be fun to organize it that way, just so it wasn't, I mean, the book's over 200 pages, so just to give it some organization. And again, a lot of that is quaint. The bliss part, I should say, is one of the shortest in the book.
I also noticed that.
You couldn't make an interesting love comic if it was 52 pages of just happiness. What's the story? I mean, that you have to have tension and struggle and trying to fix the problem. And if it's all bliss, there's no problem. However, we want to start there because that's part of it too.
Absolutely, and I think that's something, you know, a lot of RT readers, they are looking for the romance, you know, they read the romance novels for exactly that reason. You have the tension, you have, you know, the course of true love never runs smooth, and that's really what we see, only we see it through the lens of kind of an earlier time in America, which for me is really interesting because you get a lot of their popular culture, what was happening in those earlier times. And for me, you know, of course I hear stories from my parents and my grandparents, but I wasn't there, so really looking at somebody living during those times to be writing about the war and be writing about women first going off to work and things like that is really interesting.
Well, that's the sociology that you get because it's 1947, it's 1952, or whatever. But the funny thing is, unlike you, I was there, but I wasn't paying attention to any of this because I was a little kid and I was watching cowboy shows. But nonetheless, it's this resolution again of a problem that in a lot of cases it could be happening right now around the block. Of course, our lives are very different and the way we surround ourselves with our activities and all of that, way different. But the funny thing is, we've never figured this out. So,
what is love?
Yeah,
what is romance?
What is, I mean, or more to the point, how do you make it work? So obviously, people have been falling in love for a billion years, and there have been problems for 1,000,000,001 years. So this is not supposed to be an educational book, but I will say that every now and then one of the stories stops and makes you think, because even though it's funny, and the characters are dressed in those Leave It to Beaver clothes and all of that kind of stuff surrounding the culture of 60 years ago, but some of it is like 6 minutes ago.
When I was going through, I love, first of all, the artwork really grabs your attention. Some of the stuff you're looking at and you're just amazed at, the space and time that it really zones into. And I think my favorite, and I know you should never read a comic on camera, but I'm going to do it anyway. There's these two old ladies, and they're looking at a younger blonde and says, "That's Elaine Gleason. She has an apartment in New York." And what a lot of stories they tell about the wildlife she's been leading there. And I love that because I live here in New York City, and I was just thinking about, like you said, like some of the things that you see today, like maybe it not be, the wild stories with men, but we all, the reputations of, where you decided to go and what you decided to do. You're always going to have those people that look at you and judge and things. And
Always.
I just thought that was just so cute. And it was like the same things that we look at today. And this is in the section of class struggle, which is the longest section in the book. And here you're talking about not only reputations, you're also talking about there's a lot of talk about money, your budgets and what kind of jobs you have. And two parents working or two people working, and do I give up my job to raise a family and things like that? And that's obviously, especially in today's economy, something that everyone is dealing with.
Yeah, it's changed so many ways, but not that way. People were worried about money in 1951, and obviously we are today. Couples get together, and nowadays it's more common for both of them to have jobs than in these stories. But even there are situations where the wife has a job and the husband feels like he's diminished because of that,
Right.
or she makes more money, so he's diminished as the breadwinner. But even if it's just him going out into the world, if he isn't doing as much as she wants for the way she sees her status, that's the tension, that's the conflict,
Right.
that in 7, 8 pages has to be resolved in this story. And it's resolved. That's the great thing about these.
There's fixes.
You'll
you
never-
too can fix your relationship.
You'll never see these characters again. This isn't a continuing character thing. Each story is some new people, problem, fixed. Now, the way they get there is what's so much fun, and often, by today's standards, laughable, but again, not always.
So I have to ask, these love comics went out in the 50s, the 60s, they phased out. Will they be making a comeback?
I think we will never see them again. Even the popular categories, the superhero ones, which are still all over the place, those have really been kept going by the big movie franchises that have spun off, the X-Men's and the Thors. If not for that, they would be a little cottage industry now, compared to this heyday where a single title would sell 1 million copies a month, sometimes 2 million a month, sometimes for the biggest ones even more. That will never happen again. We have too many other entertainments now.
The rise of the internet, especially movies, film, television.
Well, the TV is a big part of it because, of course, it's free, unless it's HBO. But just all the things that used to be a part of one's day, even the newspaper funnies, which were hugely popular. I mean, when there was a strike of a newspaper in New York once, Mayor LaGuardia read them over the radio so people would know what was going on. They weren't seeing it in New York, but the stories were continuing, Dick Tracy, Little Orphan Annie. It was an important thing. We still have newspapers, but everybody knows that's diminishing. And then within the newspaper, the little part that the comic strips hold. I just don't know that we'll ever find this form and this content again the way it used to be when they were, you know, one of the 3 or 4 most popular forms of entertainment on the newsstand.
Well, we can go to Agonizing Love, your new book that's out now, and I suggest that art lovers pick it up because it has some great artwork. I also suggest that romance lovers pick it up, and then also anybody that's really interested in this time period, post-war America, and what was happening. I think you get a really good feel for the pop culture back then.
Well, thanks, Morgan. I agree with all of what you said.
Well, thanks for meeting with me today, and I really appreciate finding out more information about your book.
Well, thanks, Morgan.